Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've seen Fight Club.
Yes, we've just come back from the Electric Cinema and we are revisiting Fight Club.
It's 20 years old this year.
20 years.
1999, so we saw The Matrix a few months ago, from around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now Fight Club. There's no suggestion I've been able to find that this is a restoration or anything like that. They're just showing it.
Yeah.
The Electric does this cinematic time machine, they call it, which is what this is part of.
Right. So earlier in the day we saw The Blue Angel, which was its 90th anniversary.
1930, so 89th it would be.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, they're showing a couple of classics.
Uh-huh.
Which again, rather like The Matrix, weird to think of this as a classic or an old film, but it is.
It's 20 years old.
20 years old, which old enough to vote. So, watching it again, it made me realise what an impact this film has had on me since I first saw it. It's a film that in some way has been on my mind since I saw it. Just somehow or other, and I've constantly just been, even though I haven't watched it in a long time, constantly sort of in my head been thinking about it or revisiting it or trying to think about what it means, and I talk about it with people sometimes, and so I first saw it when I was probably 14. My brother was actually interested in film before I was, so he would have been like 12. And our parents went out one evening and my brother got them to rent Fight Club for us. So we watched that and I thought, wow, this blew my fucking mind. I mean, spoilers, I guess, coming up if you've never seen it, but the twist blew my mind completely. I didn't see it coming, and it changed my view on it. It was fantastic. And I wouldn't say I got like obsessed with it, but I took an interest in things around it. So it was this satire on corporate America and what the world was like, and it made you think like, oh, here's a film that was really making a statement about these sorts of things. And I also read the novel a little later that it's based on by Chuck Palahniuk. It's adapted. The screenplay is written by Jim Ulls. I read a couple of his other novels first that I happened to see, read Fight Club. And like I say, it's a film that I've kind of thought about and rethought about for a long time. So it's a satire, but I don't think it's as much of a satire as it thinks it is. There's a tonal imbalance to what goes on in it. I think it's about a feminized America that's left white men with no identity, no purpose. And I think it's sort of satirizing that, but at the same time, the tone is one of, isn't everything they're doing so cool? Isn't Tyler so cool? Because you're kind of in the narrator's headspace. The narrator doesn't have a name. He's typically referred to as Jack, because he talks about the I Am Jack's Raging Bile Duct, all that sort of thing, those books that he finds. So you're in his headspace, and in his headspace, Tyler is his ideal self-image. Yes. So you do get these contradictions, because it's about, that fantastic scene in the middle where Tyler addresses the members of Fight Club and says, we were all raised to believe that we'd be movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. But you're watching Brad Pitt going, you are.
Yes,
and he talks to Jared Leto, who was in the Mars Volta or something, whatever band he was in at the time, and you're going, how much money are you making for this movie? So there's this contradiction in it, central contradiction, that is there. The film never entirely addresses, but it knows it's there. I think.
Well, that might be one of the ironies in the way that it was received, because I do think it's meant to be, satire and, satire in the best sense, that it's making fun of something, but it's also revealing something, right? But I actually kind of think that sociologically, so the film came out and it wasn't a very big success, and really, I just remember having arguments with people because I thought it was great, and kind of a lot of my friends didn't, and then kind of that was that until the film was released on video or maybe DVD by then, and then it kind of acquired a huge following, all kind of adolescent boys who I think, rather than seeing the satire, saw it as a kind of guide to life, really.
Yeah, I would be part of that. Not exactly a guide to life, but you certainly, when I was that age, you sort of looked at it. I looked at it and sort of went, "This is a film that's like telling me something new, offering me a perspective that I feel I can relate to, and that sort of thing." I think that's like around about how I felt. I didn't go mad in that sense. I didn't like base my life on it, but. But like, well, I remember, the narration was cool, and things about it were cool, and the things that it said were cool, and the attitude that it had, and Tyler kind of not listening to authority and all that kind of stuff was cool. And I remember I copied bits of it for like English sort of work that I did, like creative writing. Well, it wasn't creative because I plagiarised bits of Fight Club. But like, there's a reason that I plagiarised Fight Club
and not something else,
and not Sylvia Plath.
Right.
So,
but tell me a little bit, because you've read the Chuck Palahniuk novel it's based on, and you said you've also kind of read other Palahniuk novels. So, how does the novel inform the film, but also how is the film distinct?
It's a great question. I don't remember the novel all that well, because it's not actually it's not my favourite of his. The one I remember the best is Survivor, which shares a lot of things, but as I recall, the ending of the novel is much more ambiguous. There's a suggestion that he ends up in a sort of... There's a suggestion that he dies, then he ends up in heaven, but you could also read it as him ending up in a mental institution, things like that. I must say, I remember it basically seeming like a faithful adaptation. Like, I don't think I read the novel coming away with a different perspective on the story than I did from the film. And the film certainly remains my dominant... the version of the story that is dominant in my head.
Okay. So, what is let me ask the question another way around. So, what does the film's audiovisual rendering kind of add that wasn't there in the novel?
What it adds is tone, I think. Like I say, this tone of things being cool, which is there in the novel. The novel's written as everything I've read of Palahniuk's is in the first person and the present tense, so it's written as the narration, and indeed the narration in the film pretty much comes wholesale from bits of the book. So that kind of tired, cynical tone is shared. But the book doesn't have the use of music. It doesn't have the swooping camera moves. It doesn't have the visceral impact of the fighting and the blood, that you were sort of recoiling from at one or 2 points.
Yes.
The bit and actually there were bits that the BBFC cut when it first came out in this country. It cut about 6 seconds. There's a bit in the fight with Angel Face where it just kind of blows to the head at the end were cut, and in the fight with Lou, similar thing, blows to the head at the end of that fight. They just felt were too sort of visceral, and they asked for those to be cut. I think they were left uncut when it came out on video later. So I think we saw the uncut version today. So that's kind of what's stronger about the film. The kind of the feeling, the emotional sort of, the emotional investment and attachment, and also Marla. Marla, I mean, we've been talking about entrances recently with Jennifer Lopez, and we talked about Marlene Dietrich today. Well, talk about an entrance.
Yes.
The way that she's introduced. Cool, dark, interesting, captivating. Who is this person? The glasses on that just completely make her eyes these voids. Smoke slowly kind of emanating from her mouth. The fur coat. Who is this? It's one of those things. I mean, Marla just is like the most desirable person in the world. She's absolutely beautiful, Helena Bonham Carter, in this. The makeup, the way that her lips and eyes are just slightly blue. Well, her eyes more so, but certainly her lips, like she's on the edge of death all the time. She has this. It's not quite emo, but it's close. It's like emo punk sort of dispossessed thing going on with her, and the fact that she's rather like Tyler. She's this free spirit who goes wherever she wants and doesn't care about anything. Really captivating. One of those. I mean, I didn't realise until watching it today. Like, wow, she is ridiculously desirable.
I realised that from the beginning. But though I suppose I wouldn't have articulated it as sexually desirable. But she's incredibly charismatic. And she definitely kind of makes an impact. And that charisma is really something to ponder, because, I think she's at least Brad Pitt's equal. In a way, that Edward Norton is not. You know, he doesn't have that charisma that the other two bring. You know, and she's got a very kind of like particular look, the cheekbones, the thinness, you know, and the eyes, as you mentioned, is kind of, you know, very, very striking, and she kind of brings you in, yeah, to kind of what can otherwise seem as a really like weirdo, dangerous kind of, you know, unappealing or unattractive character. It could have been very easily rendered in that way, right? So, but she magnetizes.
But she's also shot and sort of visually designed that way. I'm thinking particularly of the bit where she calls the house on Paper Street and to announce that she's taken a lethal overdose of pills, or what she thinks might be a lethal overdose of Xanax. And the way she's shot, the film cuts to her, and it's an almost top-down shot, and she's on sort of lying through the frame, and it's close up, and it's smoky, and it's in that blue dress, and her eyes are looking up, and God. Wow.
Well, there you go.
The film sort of desires her, and the film shows you why the character desires her too. And maybe it's a failing, I think, of the film that it talks about. Maybe it's not a failing, but it talks about a feminized world and this reaction to it. The characters talk about we're a generation of men raised by women. They talk about mothers and. But she's the only female character in the film. You know, maybe apart from Chloe, the cancer patient. Not really. She's the only female character. So, you know, it's probably it's not right to talk about it as a failing, because it's doing something with it. It's doing something with. It's like they're incels, these guys, basically. Like, you know, they talk about feminization. They talk about how men have become subservient and this sort of thing, but actually they don't have anything to do with women, and that's sort of why, you know.
Though, you know, Brad Pitt's speech that they're already too feminized is his argument for not having more to do with women, that they've had enough of women. Yeah. Well, the next step is to get married, but no, you've already been raised by women all your life because your parents got divorced and blah blah blah. So, I mean, what strikes me about that whole thing is how prescient it seems now. You know, I mean, kind of, this was 20 years ago, and that kind of, you know, semi-fascist groupings of men kind of trying to redefine their masculinity and kind of overcompensating with kind of militaristic elements, and also like, you know, physical suffering and torture and, you know, military maneuvers and all that stuff is, you know, Trump.
It paradizes. So, you know, it starts off with Jack's obsession with support groups. He doesn't have any of these illnesses or maladies, but he goes to testicular cancer support group. He goes to blood parasites. He goes to this, that, and the other. He gets obsessed with them, with the kind of emotional opening up that it affords. And, you know, although he doesn't ever tell the truth about himself, you see him cry. You know, Bob with bitch tits pulls him in, and he cries all over him. And then Fight Club is a new support group. It says, like, this is the masculine version of a support group. It's one where men get together and beat each other up, and so it paradizes kind of what these men are doing. But you also see the appeal. You get why you feel their release. I think
you do. Actually, it's very interesting because, you know, this thing about men and violence and so on. Like, you know, it's kind of always seen as kind of negative. And I suppose, you know, maybe it is, but I remember there's this wonderful film with Yves Montand and Romy Schneider, and so Romy Schneider falls in love with this kind of working class man who's crazy about her, and, you know, there's one moment where, you know, he's got her in his arm, he's just, you know, completed a business deal, and he says, "I'm so happy, I just feel like beating somebody up," right? You know, and actually, there's this thing about kind of, I don't know, men and release, and, you know, kind of, I mean, I remember also talking to this cab driver in Cuba, you know, and he was asking about England, and I was saying, oh, you know, like, sometimes it's so violent, it's like, you know, on a Saturday night, kind of young men, they get drunk and they just beat each other up, and he goes, well, you know, what would it be to be a young man if you didn't want to beat each other up, right? Like, you know, so, Yeah, I mean, I haven't formulated thoughts there, but those are kind of anecdotes, right? In the sense that, kind of that there is maybe something, I don't know, primal there, or...
Is it César and Rosalie?
Yes, it is César and Rosalie.
César and Rosalie. At the start of the when the flat's been blown up and Jack rings Tyler and they go to the bar and then he says, "I want you to hit me in the face," and they start fighting. You feel that as a bonding moment between the two of them.
Yes,
really strongly. Actually, weirdly, like it's funny because it's funny kind of watching it back and remembering all of these bits and not being able to remember how I felt watching them the first time in a way. Like I wish I could remember how I took it the first time.
Well, I mean, what I remember I saw it in Newcastle,
right?
And I think I was there to give a talk, and I was just killing some time, so I just kind of, I mean, obviously I'd heard about it and so on, but what I remember thinking was how imaginative the whole narration thing was, particularly at the beginning. I mean, I was completely dazzled by all those camera moves from IKEA through the furniture, through, going in and out of like kind of imagery, and kind of different consumer spaces that the film does at the beginning. I mean, that, maybe now on a computer you can do that easily, but then it seemed completely dazzling.
It was very, very new. Photogrammetry is the name of the technique, or at least one of the techniques that they use. There's that pan across the IKEA space that it's empty and it fills up with the labels and the price tags, and it's just in one take, and then he kind of walks through it, walking through his own little catalogue. And there's that shot that struck me really this time of the pull out of all the rubbish in the bin, and it's like there's a Krispy Kreme, there's a Starbucks, and they've all got the logos on them, and then you come out and it's a shot of a trash bin.
Yeah. No, I thought that all of that was kind of amazing, really. What do you think of Edward Norton?
I think he's fantastic, and I think he kind of, I think he ties the entire film together. Like, the film needs this tired, cynical tone on top of everything. That's kind of, and also he's narrating from a position of knowing everything that's happened. So he knows how things are going to turn out. So I suppose that cynicism is kind of shared between, he's cynical about the world that he inhabited. You kind of understand through him why it was so appealing to break out of the corporate blah blah blah. But he's also cynical, I suppose, about what Fight Club became and how the men ended up behaving.
I think I like him, and I think he's very good in it. The reason why I was asking the question was because I understand that Matt Damon was in the running for that part.
All right.
And I just wondered what another movie star, would have brought to it. Yeah. Because in a way, I do think that, and it's part of the narrative, it's not his fault, but you're never kind of really drawn into his dilemma. I never felt I empathize with what his problem is. And actually, I think that's a weakness in the film. So as an actor, he does a fabulous job. I love the way he walks. He definitely has, a nerdy everyman kind of quality, to him. But I don't think he draws you in emotionally. The way that I think Helena Bonham Carter and Brad Pitt, in a way, do. Like, they represent what they represent so instantaneously.
I think he does as well. He just represents something a lot more dour. He couldn't be bursting with charisma in the same way, because that's not the character. I can't imagine Matt Damon doing the role. I can't imagine anyone but Ed Norton doing the role. I think he makes it his own. It feels like it's written for him, the way he plays it. And I don't quite agree that you. I mean, you say you don't get into his. You don't feel the attachment to his dilemma or his problem. What problem do you mean? Is his?
Well,
insomnia?
I mean, maybe that's also a problem with the film, because you take a little while discovering it, right? So, and he doesn't give answers. So he's unsatisfied with his life. He doesn't know what to change it into. He can't answer that question, and and all we see at the end is he still hasn't answered that question, and he shot himself, and kind of buildings about him begin to fall down, right? So,
but he finally connects with Marla. Right at the very end, they share something. You think, what's the world going to be after this? Because all these buildings are coming down and the collapse of society. But he's got Marla. He's with Marla now. They're going to be honest. He's going to be able to. And having got rid of Tyler. But I think I agree that he doesn't answer questions about what he wants, because I think he's representing a generation that doesn't know what it wants. He's part of this Generation X that is like the slacker generation, the generation that gets caught in between.
But his unconscious is driving him to create crypto-fascist groups, right? So, yeah. I mean, what does that tell you about him? And he's very efficient at organizing them and very successful at organizing them.
Yeah, Tyler's brilliant at that.
So, what does his better self?
I guess it's a search for masculinity, masculine symbols, and it's kind of connected to such aggression initially through Fight Club, and eventually through like organized terrorism, that it's sort of like it couldn't be anything but that. That's what he's missing in his life, and then taken to a kind of nth degree. This is what it becomes, and everyone else, and it's sort of, and I think again it talks about a generation, because everyone who becomes part of Fight Club, part of Project Mayhem, shares this. This is like the film's talking about. This is what's missing in their life, and they express it very stupidly, and sort of badly. It's not like realistic.
I think it's part of the problem with the film. To me, that rising crypto-fascism is not directly attributed to him, as a kind of a skill or a desire, or, and maybe, we don't know kind of where it comes from. And also the fact, when you're watching the film, I enjoyed that it was almost all played for laughs, right? So he shows up at a police station, they wink at him, or a bar, they wink at him. They're everywhere is the thing. But actually, I think that's kind of... It would have been so much more interesting had they made that more terrorizing.
Well, I mean, they try and cut his balls off.
Even that's played a little bit for laughs. A
little bit, but I mean, you still... It's still, he's sort of... having returned to being Jack as opposed to Tyler, he's completely in over his head now, and he's like, things have been set up for him to lose. He's gonna.
Okay, but I don't know if you're understanding me, because I just think that this being enmeshed in a kind of a crypto-fascist relations with people who just want to beat people up and destroy things should be a very scary thing, and it's not presented in that manner.
I think that goes to the tonal issue that I have with the film, that I don't think I like need it to moralize. I think it's like it can leave you to make your own decisions about what it's presenting, but you are left going, these guys are cool, and the stuff that's going on is cool, and it looks so cool, and they behave so cool, and they're you don't exactly feel what they're fighting for, partly because it's not that well defined until you get to we're going to tear down civilization and start from scratch. And again, you kind of feel, wow, that's cool, in a sort of general way. Start from scratch, yeah, fuck the system, sort of,
Which is exactly what all those kind of, kids who go on to a high school and shoot 500 people probably feel like.
Well, I mean
maybe Edward Norton is like the original.
Yeah, he sort of is. I mean, maybe not the original. I think this is... When was the Columbine shooting? That was 1999, I think.
Was it?
About then. Which is not to say like this must have inspired it, but it's sort of, it was representing a feeling. But like I say, I mentioned incels before. Incel wasn't a word until about 4 years ago.
I know, but I certainly had never come across it. So
so it's that it definitely relates to a kind of continuing sort of feeling that people who I don't know should know better still feel, but like people who have more power than they think, or people have more, and I suppose is what privilege speaks of, having kind of more power than you think. And there's a reason that like school shooters are white guys, middle class a lot of the time. Sort of that people who feel like have been dealt a pretty alright hand and feel like it's a lot worse than it. They feel like, why aren't I at the top? Why don't I feel like I'm at the top? Sort of thing. And then I think puberty sort of accelerates that. But there's a reason that I don't think I've heard of a single girl doing a school shooting. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I think there is something in that. I think the film is very much, well, the whole thing is about, what is it to be a man, right? And kind of, and the film's perceived distinction between what Brad Pitt represents and what Edward Norton represents, which, kind of, it's difficult to see how what Edward Norton represents is so bad, I mean, he's also very fit, he's also quite good looking, he's got a good job, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't think that, though. That's the thing. It's like image and reality, and what he wants is Brad Pitt.
Yes. Yeah. Which is completely understandable, by the way.
Yeah. And not a little homoerotic.
Well, I suppose kind of people project those things. I mean, actually, to be fair, I thought his body was on display much more than turned out to be the case.
Brad Pitt's.
Yeah.
Right.
I think those moments where he's shirtless with that amazing kind of chest. I mean, I think you see it twice maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean,
his shirt's open. I mean,
his shirt's open, and of course he's got like fabulous arms and biceps and all of that. But in terms of like
full-on sweaty fight mode Brad Pitt, you see once or twice.
Yeah, it's in terms of the camera kind of look at this, body. It's actually I remembered it as being much more,
right?
Than it turned out to be actually.
I think it's definitely a camera that admires his physique, though,
and that uses it, right? And the clothes and so on are designed for that. There's always like a bit of butt showing, and the shirt is unbuttoned, the last button is unbuttoned. So there are kind of little moments like that. But in terms of like, there isn't the equivalent of a Thelma and Louise moment, right, where he's just in bed with his shirt off and you're asked to admire like his abs or whatever, right?
But what you are, but I think you are still meant to find him attractive. It's not like you're meant to. It's not like he's.
Well, you're meant to find him the most attractive because he is, the alter ego, right? The ideal ego.
But I mean, attractive as opposed to, or at least in combination with, like physically powerful, that sort of thing. Like he is physically powerful, and there's one or two shots of him when he's fighting and kind of covered in sweat and blood that he looks physically intimidating, but he looks beautiful.
Yes.
He's shot to look beautiful.
Yes.
And he's dressed to look beautiful, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, there is that.
So the camera desires him.
I mean, yes. Well, it's an interesting thing, really, because if I were to say, like, so you're talking about homoeroticism, and I think, yes, the film gives gay men lots to work with, But on the other hand, I was also surprised at how the film is not like that. Yeah, so for example, I think in a way it's a very heterosexual look at men, right? So, there's that moment where they shave the guy's head, the guy should be, and actually, he's there all hairy and, kind of, you can't see his body for the hair, right? Kind of, I think a more kind of gay aesthetic of the period would have at least shaved him and oiled him up so that, So I think.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't mean that, but maybe the film is like latently gay. Well, I just think no. I mean, I'm being glib, but what I mean is that sort of, if the film reflects sort of Jack's mental state, what he sees, what he wants, is something like Tyler, then it's not to say the character is gay and I found a secret thing to like. That's not what I'm saying, but it's interesting that I think he more than powerful and intimidating. Brad Pitt's attractive, I think.
Yes, but it is more than that. He's attractive. He says, he's attractive. He's stronger. He's good in bed. He's smarter. Yeah, he's kind of more daring, right? It is all the things that Edward Norton wants to be, but thinks he isn't. You know.
Yeah, daring is
So and of course you could say, well, that's very narcissistic also. Yeah, that's kind of, this is how he pictures, you know, his ideal self. Because you could argue, and let me argue for the sake of argument, you can tear it down. But, you know, a kind of a heterosexual might have, you know, said, okay, I want like, you know, I want to be strong, or I want to be, you know, powerful or something. But that actually, you know, that kind of pretty face look might not have been an ideal self-ego thing.
How do you mean? What would have been a better?
I mean, I just kind of assume that, you know, other heterosexual men don't think, you know, about an ideal projection of themselves, or an ideal someone else that they want to be, to have like pretty eyes and a full lower lip, you know, and so I mean, you know what I mean? It's like the difference between, I don't know, because sometimes when men talk about other men's bodies, they'll go, "Oof, he's so big" or something. Yeah, kind of. They won't say he's got beautiful lips.
Yeah, but they might want to.
I think think.
Yeah, I think underneath it all, I think
you know better. I defer to your superior knowledge in this matter.
You know, maybe I'm just revealing things about myself that I don't mean to. But I think we're all, you know, we don't have to ride the horses to go into the stable. Put it that way. But I think but to even deny that, like, we even know where the stable is lying. You know, I think we know what we think is attractive, because you know, when guys work out, when guys have, you know, beauty regimens, whatever they may be, you know, we still kind of know what we want to look like.
Yeah, but it's interesting because if you think of like the top movie stars of the period, like, you know, people that you know, both, you know, men and women liked, or even worse, if you think of the, you know, the ones that men particularly liked, you know, prettiness wasn't a criteria. I mean, some of them were pretty, like Gary Cooper or whatever, but then you have people like Clark Gable and so on who are not, you know, normally pretty, or Spencer Tracy, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of, or Edward G. Robinson, right? Like, kind of, you know, so, but anyway, I don't know, maybe, maybe it's just my own kind of stereotype.
I don't know. Brad Pitt's definitely pretty.
My God,
I mean, you've said pretty before that you couldn't even take him seriously when he was younger because he was so beautiful.
He was, but also he was very bad. Like, you know, I mean, if you see his performance, which he got nominated for an Oscar for, but is it 7 Monkeys or something like that, or 9
12
monkeys? Or 12 monkeys? A lot of monkeys.
7 or 9.
I mean, he is so incredibly over the top and mannered. And
did you say he was Oscar nominated for that?
He was Oscar nominated for that.
Really?
Yeah, and he's completely OTT in it, you know. And I remember finding it embarrassing to watch, but you know, he was giving a performance, so he got nominated.
Yeah, best supporting actor. Didn't know that. I thought his first was Benjamin Button, 10 years ago. No.
Well, it might have been his first as a leading actor. But
that was his first as leading actor. Yeah. And he's had a few since then. Moneyball. Actually, that's the only one he's had for actor. He's been in Best Picture nominees.
Yes. I mean, you know, the thing about Brad Pitt is, I think there's very few of contemporary stars, or even, you know, of his generation, who have the filmography that he has. Like, you know, I mean, he's been in both a lot of landmark films and then a lot of cult films like this, you know, a lot of kind of films that afterwards seem to matter. I mean, in fact, I would argue that he's had much fewer big box office successes, you know, than other stars of his generation. You know, it's like somebody like DiCaprio, they're all hits, like one after the other, and mammoth hits. Or, you know, Tom Cruise, the same, right? But just compare Tom Cruise's filmography to Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is full of such interesting films, right? You know.
Yeah. Well, when Brad Pitt was being kind of positioned in sort of the early mid-2000s as the kind of premier box office star, the films weren't any good. Were they like The Mexican? And
The Mexican
was it
terrible.
Troy he was in? Or Alexander? One of those.
Well, I think that's underrated, and, you know, I like that. Alexander the
Spy
Great
Game.
film.
Ocean's 11,
Um,
to be fair to him. He was fantastic in that. Mr. and Mrs. Smith I liked an awful lot.
Me too. But there's more. Let me just kind of dig it up. Brad Pitt films that I think, have a certain value that kind of people will come back to. So, we just saw Ad Astra. I think that will be one. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That will be one. The Big Short, Fury, 12 Years a Slave, Killing Them Softly, Moneyball, The Tree of Life, my God, Inglourious Bastards, Benjamin Button, The Assassination of Jesse James, then, less interesting to me, but I think it has an afterlife, Babel, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Oceans films, I think they'll just be popular for a long time on television. Snatch, Fight Club. It's interesting, 7 Years in Tibet, which is terrible, is cited in this film. So Seven, I think, is going to have, a long life. Likewise, I love True Romance. I think it's still really underrated. And then there are oddities like Johnny Suede and Cool World, that again, they're still out there circulating. And of course, Thelma and Louise. So, that's an interesting filmography, right?
Interview with the Vampire as well.
An Interview with the Vampire, yes.
That one, the look of him and Tom Cruise and that sort of defined the sexual dreams of a generation.
And Antonio Banderas, and River Phoenix.
Was it?
Yeah. Or was it? Or did what's his name replace him? No, I can't remember.
Christian Slater.
Christian Slater, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but to go back to Fight Club, any last observations?
Well, it's sort of, I feel like we've barely really scratched the surface. We've got, obviously we've got the general themes, masculinity, the modern world, kind of men's feeling on their position in the world, privilege, this sort of thing. Things that it was, I agree, prescient about. Things that have kind of become, not prescient, but things that have become more part of a kind of cultural conversation than they were at the time of its release. It's a film that's sort of very much lasts, sort of, in that respect. And, you kind of feel like maybe I wish it would be clearer in some respects about what it's saying, but then if it were, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting a film, and it wouldn't be nearly as interesting to think about. And so to kind of constantly have it in my head over these years about what does it mean, and what is it telling me, and who is it addressing, and how, and is it satire, or is it not? Does it mean what it says? All this sort of thing. I don't think I'll ever really get to the bottom of that. I think it's a film which, maybe depending on your mood, sort of offers a different interpretation. It's still so funny. I didn't realise it was funny until the second time I watched it. I remember that. Watched it the first time with my brother, and I thought, wow, God, I've never seen anything so like it. And then the second time I watched it was with friends, and that thing of when you watch something with a group of people, it becomes funnier. Realised how funny it was the second time. It's kind of darkly funny, and like the jokes in the background and things, and just things that actually are plain funny that I paid attention to the first time, like the dildo bit. It's just a great joke.
Yes.
The guy's performance is great. And it moves so smoothly. I mean, it's interesting thinking about how Fincher has changed as a director since then, because watching Mindhunter recently, the second season, you go, this is so restrained and calm, and he sparse in some respects, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but just like the frame is just populated with sort of only what it needs to be populated with.
Yes.
And
mind you, it's also television, and there are fewer resources.
Sure. Well, okay, but
used to.
But then maybe something like The Social Network still doesn't do the sort of, doesn't take the. might be too much to say it doesn't take the kind of creative visual leaps that Fight Club does, but it doesn't have anything like the photogrammetry, like the moving camera, things like that, things that he was doing into, you know, kind of Panic Room, the camera that roams through the house.
Yes.
But even when you look at Panic Room was what, 2002 maybe? You look at the difference that 3 years made and how it's those shots really show off here. Yes. And in Panic Room they're quiet and insidious and subtle, despite the fact that it's a CGI shot that moves throughout an entire house in one go, sort of thing. Like,
yes, I mean, again, I just wonder if those
it's like he's refined his technique over the years.
Do you think that's the case with Gone Girl, which is his most recent?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a much better example than The Social Network, and a bit later, and that's much more like Mindhunter, I think, where it's sort of... There are things like the movement of an eyebrow, you know, the timing of the movement of someone's head, something like that. Like the meaning of that sort of thing is amplified so much in what Fincher does more recently. I think, you know, it's not the kind of thing he was doing back in the days of Seven and Fight Club.
So you think this is a film that will have another re-release in 20 years' time?
I see it coming back time and again. I mean, you were saying, you know, it got very poor reviews at the time.
It didn't get poor, but they were very mixed, yeah.
Really, really mixed reviews and very polarised opinion. And it didn't do as well at the box office.
It was a flop.
Yeah, so it made $100 million, roughly, and a budget of $60 million.
I think it was more like, well, maybe internationally it made 100, but I think, you know, at home it was something like 30 odd.
Didn't do very
really
well.
Flopped.
And and you know, it's a sort of archetypal cult film. Came out on DVD and video, and as you say, teenage boys took to it like moths to a flame.
Yes, I mean, I think it might be the defining cult film of that period. You know, I mean, again, certainly with men, yeah. For myself, I must say, you know, I saw it a couple of times when it came out. I think I might have even, you know, put it on a syllabus one year. I did think kind of all the stuff about narration and the visuals I found fascinating. But it's not something that, you know, for I suppose my personality or who I am, it doesn't draw me in. I really don't care very much about those concerns. You know, so I'm a bit kind of... It's not a film that that I've revisited very much since. And though I saw it again, and I kind of... Well, I felt kind of a little bit the way that I did then. You know, I kind of... I really appreciated a lot of elements about it. Some even more than I did before. But it's still a film that keeps me at a distance. You know, all of those concerns with what being a man is and fighting, and it's been of no interest to me whatsoever all my life, and it's not going to become one now.
I'm just seeing if I can get more information on its box office, because that 100 million figure is very reductive and doesn't actually give any detail. Against its production budget of $63 million, the film grossed $37 million from its theatrical run in the US and Canada, and $100 million worldwide.
Right.
So very underwhelming in the US.
Yeah. Well, in the US, a flop. There's no other way of putting it because, you know, kind of. I think the rule of thumb used to be, it probably isn't that like that anymore, but with DVD and so on, is that if a film made its cost, not including marketing and advertising, you know, then it would turn a profit. So if it cost 69 million, it would have had to, you know, gross that amount in the US box office to make it, you know.
There was a comedian called Patrice O'Neill who was a big fat black guy who was great. He died of diabetes, I think, about 10 years ago. And he used to go on the Opie and Anthony show in America a lot, and he talked about Fight Club, and it's a fantastic clip on YouTube where he says that every black audience should like, black people need to see Fight Club to understand white people. He said, like, I got into the film.
Wow.
It's a really interesting way of thinking about it. Like, he says, I got into the cinema, and I thought, like, I'm seeing something that I shouldn't be allowed to see, like, not supposed to see. Like, this is like the apex of something white.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting. True. And I think that's true of whiteness and straightness.
Yes, because one of the things that you don't see in the film, in all of the men in the Fight Club, is black men.
Yeah, there's maybe 2.
I don't remember any of them.
I definitely remember 1 or 2, but like the chef who nods at the end, the main chef, the head chef.
But in the fight scenes,
and no, there is 1 or 2 in the fight scenes, but not actually fighting. I don't think you see them in the crowd. But yeah, it's extremely white.
Yes. So, I get that comment. Yeah. So, if you get a chance to see it, do. It remains as interesting as ever and arguably as problematic as ever. I'm very glad I went to see it. It
may be maybe a little bit like Starship Troopers in the sense that it's problematic because it gets you into the head of problematic sort of people and attitudes. Without necessarily endorsing them, but it helps you understand them. That's why you have these questions about who is it talking to and what does it mean and how satirical is it and does it mean what it says and all that sort of thing, which I think Starship Troopers does more deliberately. I think it kind of Starship Troopers is about propaganda and it shows you how propaganda works by using it on you, which I think it's a fantastic film. But I think Fight Club, maybe meaning to a little bit less, does something similar. It gets you into the heads of these people and you feel what they feel, I think. And the fact that what they feel is not entirely positive or leads to problematic things is why it's on your mind for so long and why I've returned to it time and again and that sort of thing.
Well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Get out of my face.
Hi guys.
Right, exactly.
How are you doing? It's Tyler Durden. So what would Tyler do? Because it's all tough and stuff. He's got the soap. He's
Project Mayhem.
Project Mayhem.
And that movie is such a heroic movie. 2 guys who are lame. It's a lame guy hero movie.
You know what, Patrice?
Dude, let me
now
tell
we
you
have
something.
problems.
I know that. I'm willing to take this pressure. I saw that movie, and when I saw it, the first thing I hit, I leaned back, crossed my arms. I saw the whole thing. And I said, this did nothing for me, but I think I've run into the holy grail of something white. Like, I think I saw some shit that I didn't supposed to see. It's self-hate, guilt, the burden of white guys who can't be men.
Well, you know something,
I'm telling you
the
that
burden of having to keep up with the Joneses, as they say,
and the burden of dishonesty, the burden of having to go to work and say blah blah blah. And so when I say weak, I don't mean like, but it's like it's this.
I understand what Patrice is saying.
It's a dream movie.
Yeah,
I'm dreaming. I'm a better man movie.
Right.
That's what Tyler Durden is.
I agree with you.
He's an imaginary better me.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're right. You weren't supposed to see that, by the way.
No.
How the fuck did you get in?
Dude, one day I said, let me watch Fight Club, because it's like, man, and I'm like, wait a minute. In the middle of it? Why it's turning into, I'm going to destroy the world, and then we find out Tyler Durden is da-da-da. I sat there and watched the credits. And I said, something happened. This means nothing to me, but this is absolutely whiteness. It's the Scarface of white people, man.